General Hospital will reveal Lucas never imagined that a seemingly simple story from his own life could open a vital door for someone else, a door that led to liberation, awakening, and perhaps even redemption. It was on a late afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the long hospital corridor windows, casting golden streaks on the tiled floors, that Lucas and Lulu sat quietly together. Neither of them spoke at first. The air was filled only with the steady hum of hospital machinery and an unspoken heaviness. Then Lucas, with a heart still bruised from the loss of his biological father, began to speak. Not to offer advice, but to share a part of himself, a memory etched deeply within him about Julian, the father he once rejected but who ultimately left behind a void that could never quite be filled. Lucas spoke about growing up without that father figure, about the childhood dreams that always lacked the reassuring presence of strong paternal arms. He admitted that for the longest time, he didn't want to forgive, didn't want to open his heart. But when they finally had the chance to reconnect, even if it was late, even if it was brief, it healed a part of him he hadn't realized was still bleeding. Not because Julian was perfect, but because they didn't let time rob them of each other forever. That truth, that emotional confession wrapped in regret and tenderness, struck Lulu in a place no one had touched in years. She was carrying a devastating secret, one that could shatter lives, and Lucas's story had just forced her to confront the consequences of continuing her silence. Lulu knew that the truth about Joe's parentage would upend the lives of everyone she cared about. But she also understood that the boy had the right to know where he came from, to reclaim a father who had been stolen from him by the secrecy and manipulation of adults. Gio wasn't just an innocent child caught in a family tragedy, he was the central figure of a conspiracy stretching back years, hidden beneath Brooke Lynn's silence and the invisible hand of Lois. Lulu couldn't forgive them for that, just as she couldn't forgive herself if she remained silent. And yet, Lucas, with his quiet empathy, offered her a way out, not a solution, but a subtle, elegant path forward. He suggested that Lulu didn't have to blow everything open with a cruel and painful revelation. Instead, she could gently steer things toward the truth without force, without confrontation. Lucas understood that feelings, especially those of a child, couldn't be manipulated or commanded. But they could be nurtured, allowed to grow naturally. He proposed that Lulu step back and let Gio begin to discover his real parents on his own terms, by creating opportunities, quiet connections, and heartfelt moments that would allow Gio to feel what no one could tell him outright. And so she did. Lulu, with quiet precision, orchestrated casual, seemingly spontaneous moments for Gio to spend time with Dante and Brooke Lynn. A sports practice where Dante was invited to assist. A family outing where both were encouraged to attend. A quiet afternoon at the library where Gio found Dante reading alone, waiting for his daughter. These weren't accidents, they were stepping stones. Slowly, Gio began to feel something unfamiliar yet comforting in Dante's presence. A sense of safety, a strange familiarity. A growing curiosity about who this man really was and why being near him felt like coming home. Throughout it all, Lulu watched from a distance. Her heart aching but warmed by the subtle shifts she could see. Brooke Lynn, too, began to notice. The way Gio looked at Dante. The way his tone softened around him. And as these suspicions grew in her heart, Brooke Lynn started to recall moments, fragments from her past, that hinted at a terrible truth, that Gio may not have just entered her life by chance, but that Lois may have orchestrated it all to conceal something far more explosive. Then came the moment no one could have predicted. After a lively soccer match one evening, Gio approached Dante. He didn't say much, just stood there, trembling slightly, before quietly calling him Dad. Dante froze. Not out of shock, but because in the deepest parts of himself, he had always known. Always hoped for this moment. Gio rushed into his arms, and in that embrace, nothing else mattered. The world around them faded. In that instant, the long-lost connection between father and son hidden by years of secrets, was restored in the most profound way possible, through love that asked for nothing, demanded nothing, but simply was. Lucas wasn't there to see that moment. But Lulu told him everything. Her voice trembled with emotion, her eyes glistened. Lucas simply nodded. He didn't need to say a word, because the plan he had whispered in that hospital hallway had worked. He hadn't just helped a child find his father. He had helped heal a woman burdened by guilt. He had helped a man discover the love he'd been unknowingly denied. He had helped a fractured family begin to rebuild on the foundation of truth. But the story wasn't over. Lois's role in this deception still loomed. Brooke Lynn would have to confront the betrayal of her mother, the collapse of her trust. Yet, for now, the most important thing had happened. Gio had chosen. Not because he was told, not because he was pushed, but because his heart had shown him the way. And none of it would have happened without Lucas, who, in sharing his story about a father lost and love rediscovered, had unknowingly set a miracle in motion. The news of Gio calling Dante Dad struck Brooke Lynn with a force she hadn't anticipated, not as a betrayal or a collapse of everything she feared losing, but as an unexpected release. She had spent so long carrying the weight of secrecy, of responsibility, of being everything Gio needed, that the moment he instinctively turned to someone else, someone who was, by blood and soul, his father, left her breathless. Not because it hurt, but because it lifted a burden she hadn't realized had been consuming her. She slipped away from the moment quietly, seeking solitude in a quiet hallway, and there, in the stillness, the emotions overwhelmed her. Her tears fell not from grief, but from the sheer magnitude of what had just happened. For the first time in years, she was not alone. She didn't have to hold the truth like a shield. She didn't have to pretend to be stronger than she was. In that moment, Brooke Lynn allowed herself to be vulnerable, not just as a guardian, but as a woman, a daughter, a human being who had tried her best in a situation that was never meant to be easy. Chase, ever intuitive, found her not long after. He said nothing. Words would have diminished the rawness of the moment. Instead, he simply reached for her hand and held it, firm and unwavering. His silent presence was an affirmation. He wasn't walking away, he wasn't judging, he wasn't asking for explanations. He was just there. That gesture grounded her more than any promise or reassurance could. From across the way, Lulu witnessed the emotional shift with her own eyes. She hadn't expected it to unfold so organically, so quietly, and with such grace. She had feared chaos, fallout, blame. Instead, she saw healing in motion, an emotional truth finally allowed to breathe. Her own tears came not from guilt, but from the overwhelming realization that Lucas's plan had worked beyond what she had ever dared to hope. The careful, delicate path they had chosen had allowed Gio to arrive at the truth on his own. Not as a wound, but as a discovery. And through that, everyone had gained something. No accusations. No screaming. No irreparable damage. Just connection. Just understanding. In that moment, Brooke Lynn didn't feel like she had lost a son, she felt like she had gained a partner in parenting. Not someone to replace her, but someone to share the responsibility, the joy, and the weight of raising a child born from a complicated truth. And more than that, she felt seen, by Chase, by Lulu, even by herself. No longer the keeper of a painful secret, but a part of something real, something honest. The days ahead would bring more conversations, more questions, and perhaps more pain. But the wall had been broken. And in its place stood something more enduring, a family reshaped by truth, not fractured by it. And in that, there was peace. Yet the peace that had settled like soft dust in the wake of Joe's revelation was, in truth, a fragile thing, beautiful, necessary, but temporary. It hovered over them gently. Like the last light of day spilling through the hospital's high windows, warming faces and softening hearts, but beneath its golden surface, tremors of a buried storm still rumbled quietly, waiting. There were truths still half buried, histories untold, and consequences that had yet to be reckoned with. And at the center of that storm, though not yet seen clearly, stood Lois, whose role in orchestrating years of silence had not yet come into focus. Lulu knew this. She wasn't naive enough to believe that one moment of emotional clarity, however powerful, could erase the damage done or prevent the truth from cutting deep once it finally surfaced. What they had gained was real, but it was delicate, like new skin formed over an old wound. Any misstep, any delayed reckoning, could rip it open again. The choices Lois had made in secret, the lives she had manipulated with unseen strings, still cast long shadows. Brooke Lynn's trust had been built on a foundation that now felt shakier with each passing hour. The knowledge that her mother might have hidden the truth about Joe's paternity from her, and from Dante, was not something that would fade quietly into the background. For now, Lulu chose not to pull back the remaining layers. The time wasn't right, and she sensed that to press further would only risk undoing the fragile harmony that had just begun to form. But she also knew with unshakable certainty that the reckoning would come. Secrets had a way of surfacing, no matter how carefully they were buried. When they did, they demanded answers, demanded ownership. Still, in that moment, caught between the fading heat of the day and the cooling hush of the hospital evening, Lulu let herself breathe. She let her shoulders, tight from months of anxiety and guilt, finally drop. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't holding her breath. She stood alone by the wide glass windows, watching Gio laugh softly with Dante down the hall, the two of them now bonded by something stronger than blood, truth. And it was then, as that warm light spilled over the linoleum floor and the voices around her dimmed, that Lulu felt something shift within her, not in fear or doubt, but in quiet absolution. She had done the right thing. Not just for Dante, who deserved to know his child. Not just for Brooke Lynn, who deserved to be free of a secret she hadn't chosen. Not just for Gio, whose future had been shrouded in half-truths and gentle lies. But for herself. Because she too had carried this burden, borne the moral weight of silence and indecision, of knowing and doing nothing. For too long. Lulu had lived in a world defined by hesitation, haunted by the question of what consequences might follow if she dared to disturb the fragile balance others had fought so hard to maintain. But Lucas's story had awakened something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time, the understanding that sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't mean avoiding pain. It means choosing truth despite it. Lucas hadn't known that when he shared his story. He had simply spoken from the raw truth of his experience. Sharing the bittersweet ache of having loved his father too late. He hadn't realized his words were a spark. But in that moment, sitting beside Lulu and speaking of Julian with such sorrow and forgiveness, he had offered her more than reflection. He had offered her permission, to act, to feel. To step out from the fog of indecision and walk toward a future where the truth might hurt, but where it could also heal. It was not a grand gesture, not an explosive intervention. It was a quiet conversation on a quiet day, two people sitting together in the lingering haze of what-ifs. And yet, it had shifted the axis of everything. It had changed how Lulu saw her role in Joe's life, in Dante's life, and in her own. She no longer saw herself as a keeper of another's fate, but as someone who could set a child free from the confines of a story written by others. That day, that moment, was not the end of anything. If anything, it was the beginning of a long, uncertain road. A road that would eventually lead to Lois, to revelations, to anger, maybe even to estrangement. But for now, Lulu allowed herself the grace to feel proud, not for being perfect. Not for fixing everything, but for making one decision that mattered. One decision that had already begun to reshape the lives around her. And all of it had begun not with a dramatic confrontation or a strategic master plan, but with a story, a memory. Offered without expectation, from someone who had once been a child kept from the truth. Lucas had not meant to set change in motion. But in doing so, he became the quiet miracle that allowed a boy to find his father, a father to find his son, and a woman long consumed by fear to finally let go. Stay tuned for the episodes ahead, where the story of Brooklyn, Dante, and Gio continues to unfold in deeper, more emotional, and more dramatic ways than ever before. What seems like a beautiful moment of reunion may only be the calm before the storm, as the truth, long buried beneath years of deception and half-truths, begins to rise to the surface. Although Gio has taken the first brave step in calling Dante Dad, the journey toward becoming a real family is far from over. It's only just begun. As Brooklyn struggles to adjust to this new reality, she will find herself forced to confront feelings she's kept locked away for years, feelings of inadequacy, of fear, of the constant pressure to be everything for a boy who was never truly hers to begin with. While she knows deep down that Gio has a right to know the man who gave him life, the ache of having to share his love, his attention, and his identity with Dante will not fade so easily. In the episodes to come, we'll see Brooklyn wrestling with guilt, questioning whether her silence helped protect Gio, or if it only delayed the inevitable fracture that truth can bring. Meanwhile, Dante must navigate the overwhelming emotions that come with suddenly discovering he has a son. Though the initial joy and shock may be powerful, the reality of becoming a father to a child who has grown up without him, who has built his world with another parental figure at the center, brings its own complications. How will Dante reconcile the years he missed? How will he find his place in Joe's life without pushing Brooklyn to the margins? And how will he handle the betrayal that comes with realizing so many people around him, perhaps even those he trusted most, kept this truth from him? And then there's Gio, caught between two worlds. Though he has found the courage to reach out to Dante, that doesn't mean the road ahead will be easy. Questions about who he is, where he belongs, and what family truly means will haunt him. He'll be forced to re-examine the love he's always known with Brooklyn and Chase while exploring the connection that now binds him to Dante, a connection he feels deeply, but doesn't fully understand. In the coming episodes, Joe's inner turmoil will deepen as he is pulled in different emotional directions, struggling to reconcile love for the woman who raised him and the man whose blood he shares. But the reunion is also under threat from a force that has not yet fully emerged into the light, Lois. The part she played in orchestrating this entire situation, in hiding the truth and reshaping the trajectory of so many lives, remains a ticking time bomb. How long can that secret stay buried? What happens when Brooklyn learns that not only did she unknowingly raise Dante's son, but that her own mother may have made that choice for her, robbing her of the chance to decide what kind of truth she could live with? The answers to these questions will slowly begin to reveal themselves, but they will not come without consequences. Loyalties will be tested. Relationships will be strained. And new wounds may open as old ones try to heal. Every character involved, Brooklyn, Dante, Gio, Lulu, Chase, and even Lucas, will be forced to reckon with their role in this unraveling tapestry of secrets and silence. But amidst the heartache, there will also be hope. There will be moments of healing, of connection, of family being redefined not just by blood, but by choice, by sacrifice, and by the quiet resilience of love. Brooklyn will find herself challenged to let go of the past and to trust that she can still have a place in Joe's life, even if it's not the same as before. Dante will have to learn to be a father in real time, not just with words but with presence, patience, and understanding. And Gio will have to discover who he is. Not based on what others kept from him, but by choosing for himself what kind of son, and what kind of person, he wants to become. So don't miss the next chapters of General Hospital, where the fragile reunion of Brooklyn, Dante, and Gio faces trials that could either break them apart, or finally make them whole. With every episode, new layers will be peeled back. Truths will be revealed, and the question will linger, can love survive the weight of so many secrets? And more importantly, can it grow stronger because of them? Stay Stay with us. The story is just beginning.